Hello, everybody, and welcome to our podcast series where we explore ways to support and empower youth in leading healthier lives. I'm Max MacDonald, and I'll be your host for this journey into topics that matter to today's youth. In each episode, we'll dive into discussions about physical health, mental well-being, professional development, and more. Our goal is to provide valuable insights, tips, and inspiration to help you live your best life. Through interviews with experts and practical advice, we aim to equip you with the tools needed to make positive choices and create a healthier future. So whether you're looking to become healthier, manage stress, or navigate your path to professional success, join us as we embark on this empowering journey together. Get ready to live well and thrive, one episode at a time. Welcome to another episode of our Live Well podcast series, empowering youth to live healthier lives. I'm Max MacDonald, and in today's episode, we're diving into the vital topic of staying active for a healthier life with our special guest, Travis Saunders. Travis is an associate professor in the Department of Applied Human Sciences at the University of Prince Edward Island. His research studies the health impact of physical activity and sedentary behavior across the lifespan. In this episode, we'll explore the numerous benefits on how physical activity can positively impact mental health and learn ways to promote a culture of movement among young people. Get ready to be inspired to move, thrive, and live a healthier lifestyle. Welcome, Travis Saunders, and thank you for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
No problem at all. I think I'll just get right into our questions and get started here. So I'll start with number one here. What do you think are the physical and mental health benefits of regular exercise for young people?
Yeah, well, I mean, for basically people of all ages, what we see is that um, the people who are physically active, basically, you pick the health outcome, and they tend to have have a good amount of that health outcome. So, or a better way to put that, I guess, is that people who are physically active, whatever health outcome you pick, they tend to perform really well. So if you look at things like aerobic fitness, like how far can you walk or how fast can you run, the more active you are, the better you're going to be at that. When we look at physical strength, the more active you are, the more strong you tend to be. Um, in terms of looking at things like your risk of getting chronic diseases like diabetes or heart disease, the more active you are, the less risk you have. When we look at risk of death, really strong, clear relationship that people who do no physical activity have a much, much higher risk of death than people who do even a small amount of physical activity. Same thing when we look at mental health, when we look at anxiety or depression, really, really, really clear and consistent evidence that people who do no physical activity have by far the highest risk. And the risk comes down very quickly by doing even just a small amount of physical activity.
Mm.
And then kind of the flip side of that, I do a lot of research on screen time and sedentary behavior, and we see the opposite stuff for that. So more time you spend being sedentary, the more time you spend in front of a screen, the greater your risk of just about every chronic condition, the more likely you are to have, depression or anxiety. So more active really reduces your health risk, and being more sedentary and more screen use really increases your risk.
Right. And you briefly touched on it there for a second, but I just wanted to ask for a little clarification of what kind of exercise is important. Could it just be a little bit of walking or more intense exercise like, resistance training or any sort of like heavier exercise?
Yeah, so that's a really good question. And I mean the scientific answer is that the more intense exercise you're able to do, the greater the benefits you typically see. So if you've heard of anything like high intensity interval training, where you're going very, very hard for a brief period of time, in terms of the bang for your buck, a higher intensity tends to be better. The problem is that high intensity exercise is not something a lot of people want to do. You have a higher risk of injury. So the more realistic answer is really whatever type of activity people are willing to do on a consistent basis and are, find enjoyable and fits in their life is probably going to be the best thing for them. It's really ideal to do some amount of aerobic activity like walking. That's really good for your heart, really good for managing things like diabetes or blood pressure. But if possible, it's really good to do at least a little bit of resistance training, because that's really important for maintaining your independence, preventing falls, or if you do fall, it's really important to be strong so you can get back up off the ground. So the way I kind of joke with my parents that, walking every day is going to keep them alive, but doing a little bit of resistance training, going to the gym is what's going to let them, go to the washroom by themselves. To sit down on a toilet, get up off a toilet when you're in your 90s, that requires some strength that you're going to get from resistance training. So some kind of combination is the best, but it's really clear that anything's better than nothing. So if somebody, all they want to do is just do a light walk and that's all they're ever going to do, that's still a lot better than doing nothing at all.
I see what you're saying. Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I know it's like ideally you want them to be doing some higher intensity training, and you mentioned that it's good to start at an earlier stage in your life. But how do you think individuals can create sustainable exercise routines that fit into their lifestyles?
So I think like when we work with our students at UPI in our personal training course, that's the thing we really focus on is okay, what do people enjoy? And what is the most vigorous form of exercise that this person's going to enjoy and will fit within their life? Because, if you don't have time to go to a gym or you can't afford going to a gym, there's no point trying to go to a gym because it's not going to work for you. And so it really depends on what the person enjoys and what fits in their lifestyle. And this is where I think one challenge is that we've really focused in North America on how do we make individuals more active as opposed to making our societies make it easy to be active. So I think we're doing some good stuff here in the long term of making, more bike lanes and things like that, but it's difficult when you live in a very car-centric society. You're driving everywhere, you have to drive your kids everywhere. It's very difficult to get in enough physical activity unless you have a really flexible job like me. So I
Mm.
think for most people, just doing what they enjoy and what fits in their life is usually the most sustainable way to become more active.
Yeah, I know for me that I commute to and from my work and school by bike every day.
Great.
Right now, it's very dangerous to do that, just in Charlottetown, just in terms of like, how car-centric our city's been designed around. But that's the way that I found works the best for me, and I
Yeah.
think it would work for a lot of other people as well. And I think that's one thing that the city can definitely do to help other people who maybe aren't as confident on a bike, aren't as confident moving with traffic, is build some bike lanes and get people moving that way to and
Yeah.
from work.
Yeah, and I would just say it doesn't feel safe. Statistically, it's still very safe.
Yes,
The
definitely.
problem is it doesn't feel safe, and so people reasonably don't want to bike because they don't feel safe. But it is a lot safer than people realize.
Yeah.
And I was just want to remind people of that because I think people don't realize how safe it is. Because it
Mm.
doesn't, biking on University Avenue does not feel safe.
No, not
Um,
at all.
but
Something feels wrong when you're up there, like right when you're 2 feet away from a suburban.
Exactly, but I think in the long term, I think the plans the city has are really good, and I think that's good because I think it's not realistic to expect individuals to be active when we put too many barriers. I think we're doing a good job of gradually reducing those barriers, which I think is really that will make a huge difference for people.
Absolutely. I think that's definitely the case. And I agree with you. I think that's great. What role does physical activity play in preventing mental health issues among youth?
Yeah, so I mean, like I mentioned earlier, like the research is really clear that physical activity is one of the best things we can do for our mental health. And that's for a few reasons. So like if you look at people who are very active versus people who are less active, the people who are active tend to have lower rates of depression or depression related symptoms. Same thing with anxiety. We actually just finished a study. My master's student, Ramina Babazadeh, just finished her thesis last week. And we that program was a year-long diet and exercise program for people with multiple risk factors for diabetes. And what we saw is that their depression and anxiety symptoms came way down in that year during that program. And that's really consistent. We see that basically every program we run, we see that. And the reason why we think that physical activity is so good for your mental health is that one is that physical activity does tend to make you feel good. And so there's, it makes you feel better. So that's one simple thing. It also tends to help you sleep better. And sleep is really important for your mental health. So if you're physically active, you're probably going to get a better quality of sleep, which will help. And a lot of types of physical activity are done with other people. And so, a lot of the benefits for mental health of physical activity may not be the benefit of the actual exercise, but just the benefit of being around other people, doing things with people, feeling like you're part of a community. That's really important for your mental health. So for all those reasons, being in some sort of group, whether it's a walking group or, playing ball hockey or, whatever it is, being part of a group that does physical activity together is really, really, really beneficial for basically everyone's mental health.
Mm. The social aspect of that is something I've been hearing a lot. But just throughout these, I've only done 3 episodes. This is the third episode of this podcast so far.
Mhm.
Out of those three, socializing has come up quite a bit. It's
Yeah.
it's it's one of the most important aspects here for keeping yourself healthy mentally.
Yeah.
So I think that that's something we want to nail home is that's an awesome part of
Yeah.
exercise, the social element.
Yeah, absolutely.
And speaking of that, how could educators, people that are involved with young people mainly, and parents promote a culture of physical activity among young people?
That's a really good question. I think one thing that's really clear is that parents who are physically active tend to have kids who are physically active. So because they tend to model it. So you mentioned, you bike. I bike to work. I'm very lucky that I live pretty close to where I work, and my daughter, both of my kids have gone to daycare on the university campus. So I've been very lucky that I've been able to bike or run them to daycare
Mm,
most of the time for the past 9 years that I've had kids in daycare. Um, but now that my son's in school, he bikes himself to school because that's how he's always gotten places. And that's what you tend to see is that, if you want your kids to be active, model that. And we see the same thing with screen time. If you don't want your kids to be spending a lot of time in front of a screen at home, then model not using a screen at the table, model not using your screen in your bedroom, if those are things you want to see.
mm,
For educators, that's a really good question. I would say something very similar. If they can model the behaviors they want to see. I also think I don't want to put this on necessarily teachers because they have an awful lot on their plates right now. But
they do.
the system as a whole, I think we could do a much better job of promoting physical activity. So one example, for example, on PEI, the province pays for bus drivers, but not crossing guards. So the
Mm,
province is subsidizing driving kids to school, but municipalities have to find the money to put a crossing guard to make it safe to walk to school. And so I think as a system, we could really think that through a bit better of how do we make it so that it's easier for kids to bike or walk to school and safer for them to do so. Um, and how can we fit physical activity throughout the school day? PEI, we're lucky we have Winter Wellness Day, which is kind of a physical activity day. So I think PEI, we're we're doing we're doing as well as a lot of places are, I think.
mm.
We're great because we're one of the only provinces that has physical education specialists, which is really beneficial to have in schools. But I think if there were more ways to really make it easier for kids to be active on their way to and from school would be one simple thing that I think would really help.
Definitely. It's the point in the day where you're most mobile, that's for sure. You're not expected to be in a classroom, sitting down, listening and learning. It's the most active part of your day for some people. They don't go
Hmm.
to gym class. So I know when you're in high school, you don't have to take gym class. It
Hmm.
becomes an optional thing when you reach a certain grade.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's nice that to have that option for people rather than feeling they need to drive because of
Yeah.
because that's just more time. That's just more time sedentary that you don't need to be sedentary for. Most people, I should say. As you say, it is an element of luck, being able to live close enough to your place of work that you can bike in. You don't live out of town. If you live out of town, it's pretty unreasonable to expect people to bike 10+ kilometers into town for work every day.
Yeah, but we could change the system so in Charlottetown, if you live next to Charlottetown Rural, you can see the school in front of your house, but you'll be bused to Colonel Gray.
Yeah.
So those are the kind of systemic things that we could do for people
Mm,
that do live close to a school. We can make it a lot easier for those people. And PEI, we're so rural, it's not going to work for everybody, but there's a
exactly.
pretty high proportion of kids. There are some schools that are really hard to walk to, even though there's a lot of kids who live within walking distance, and that's where I'd really like to see long term really, build up that capacity to walk within communities.
Yeah, it would be nice to see for sure. All right, let's go on towards a more personal question. How did you incorporate regular exercise into your routine?
I mean, it's tough, and that's why, so I tend to, like I said, we made a conscious choice when we moved to PEI. We moved near downtown so that we could walk downtown and still be close enough that I could walk or bike to the university. And we were very fortunate to, be able to afford that financially. We couldn't afford that now, but we could when we moved here 10 years ago. And so we're very fortunate to do that. I'm also very fortunate that I have a very flexible job. And so I'm very lucky that I can, bike or run to work most days. I also can, shift around my day so I can go to the pool, which is on campus, or I can go for a run on the trail, which is next to campus.
Hmm.
And so I think I'm very, very fortunate. I also, as a kinesiology professor, I can justify being active a lot easier than a lot of people can, because I spend all day talking about this and teaching about the importance. So I think, in some ways, I think the I'm in a very fortunate situation, but I wish there was a case study for how we made it easier for more people to be active. I have access to showers at work. I have access to a good place to store my bike. Those are all things that make it easy to be active. And I think we need to make it so that more workplaces have those bike racks, have those showers, have the flexibility to go do a workout at lunch. Because when you talk to people, like, what are the barriers? The main barriers are time and money.
Yeah.
Those are the reasons people aren't active. And so making things flexible so those aren't barriers anymore, I think is really what's been key for me, and would help a lot of people if they had those options.
Yeah. Are there any other challenges besides the one you just mentioned that you faced in maintaining your active lifestyle?
I mean, so I've got two kids under 10, and so those are the big challenges for me is that, if I don't get my exercise in during the workday, I'm not going to see my kids at home. I'm going to have to work out at night and not see them. And so I
Mm,
really do my best to get in my activity on my way to and from work and do something during the workday. Because those for me personally are really the biggest barriers is just how do I fit this in and still do all the stuff I have to do during the day
mm.
and the stuff I want to do with my kids at night.
I see. Time and money, very important.
Yeah.
And you mentioned working out at night being suboptimal for your socially and for parentally. It's not very nice to have to work out and not spend time with your kids. But does it matter for any like other time reasons, any biological reasons why exercising at a certain time of day is better than one other time?
So that's a great question. And I think it depends on the specific health benefit you're looking for. Like I think for strength training, there's a time of day when you have higher testosterone levels, and so you might get more benefit. I think it's in the morning for that, but I could be wrong. I know a lot more about aerobic activity than resistance training,
Right.
but but it kind of comes back to what I was saying before about like the best type of exercise being the type of exercise you enjoy. And it's the same way, if there's a time of your day when it fits for you, whether it's the morning or night, it's better to do it at a time that might not be optimal from a biological perspective if it's what actually fits in your life. Like I know
Mm,
for me, I don't love working out at night because it wakes me up and then it takes me a while to fall asleep.
mm,
But I play ball hockey on Thursday nights and ice hockey on Sunday nights because that's the only time I can do it. And
right.
so I don't sleep as well as I normally would those nights, but it's a worthwhile trade-off.
For
Um,
sure.
and the research is pretty clear there too. Like physical activity is really good for your health. Sleep is really good for your health. But if the only time you can exercise at 6 in the morning and you're cutting back a little bit on sleep, it's still worth doing that.
Right.
It's better to get as much sleep as you can and then work out some other time. But if you can only get it in the morning, just get it in whenever you can, and it's still more beneficial than not doing it.
Right. The exercise is worth it.
Exactly. It's always going to benefit you. Yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of being worth it, let's talk about some of those overall positive impacts. So, how does regular physical activity positively impact a person's overall well-being?
Right. So, I mean, like I said before, kind of you pick a health outcome, whether it's blood pressure, bone density, risk of falls, many types of cancer, diabetes, mental health, whatever it is, you pick it. More physically active you are, the lower your risk is for those negative outcomes. Um, and that's just because like physical activity has so many impacts on your body. So it helps regulate your blood sugar, it helps lower your blood pressure, it improves your balance, so you're less likely to fall. Being stronger allows you to do more in your life. And all these things, there's the direct benefit of being stronger and being less likely to fall. But there's indirect benefits. So like we for years ran a cancer exercise program here at UPEI. And a big part of that was building strength and having people get down on the ground and just get back up again to be able to physically do that. And I didn't run the program. I was involved in the background, but Angelique Carter was our kinesiologist that ran that and did an amazing job. And
Mm,
what we saw is that there were indirect benefits like someone who hadn't been able to mash potatoes for years and years and years had enough strength to mash potatoes again. And that's really important on PEI for your overall quality of life to be able to make mashed potatoes. Um,
exactly.
we had grandparents who couldn't watch their grandkids on their own because they were worried if they got down on the floor to play with their kids, they wouldn't be able to get back up. Or a woman whose husband, didn't want to leave them by themselves in case they fell and couldn't get up on their own, or vice versa. And so those are all the benefits of physical activity. They're physical benefits, but have huge benefits in terms of your quality of life and your mental health, knowing that you feel safe and independent and have autonomy in your life, that you're not relying on other people, you can contribute to your family, you can take care of your kids. And so that's why, it's a long and meandering answer, but physical activity is really good for your physical health, but then that bleeds over and improves a whole bunch of other areas of your life to make your life a lot better overall.
Yeah, it gives you confidence. It gives you the confidence to do what you want to do.
Exactly,
Yeah,
exactly.
love that. I just wanted to clarify one other thing though, just that I was at a question about. We say regular physical activity. How often is regular? Is that every day, multiple times a week?
So that's a great question, and I'm gonna kind of go back to the thing I've been saying is
Yeah.
like more frequent is better, but whatever you can fit. And when we look at Canada's physical activity guidelines say that adults should be doing at least 2.5 hours a week of physical activity spread across the week. But we don't tell you how to do that. So you could be a weekend warrior that goes out and rides your bike for 3 hours on a Sunday, or you could be someone who does, a half hour a day, 5 days a week. And basically what we see is that both of those people are getting lots of benefits. So ideally, you'd like to be getting physical activity on a daily basis, because then if you miss one day, it's not such a big deal. Whereas if you're doing it all on the weekend, you have one bad weekend and you've got no activity for a couple weeks straight.
Mm.
So as frequently as possible, but like I keep saying, everything counts and everything's beneficial. So whatever it looks like in your life is going to be better than not doing it.
All right. So I'm going to just wrap up some stuff here. I think that this is a pretty straightforward answer when it comes to how important is physical exercise. Vary and do it as much as you can, but
Yeah.
do whatever you can do. Not there's no strict guidelines in place for what exactly you have to accomplish, what that looks like to you. Time is probably the most important factor here, and how often people will exercise and what they can do. And there's a lot of things the province can be doing and the city could probably be doing to make that easier for people.
Yeah. And I
Big
would say,
step.
if I could just add, if someone's in a position where they are, someone's boss, or have the ability to try and reduce barriers for other people, I think that's where we're going to see the biggest bang for your buck. Like, it's one thing for people like me who, have the means, have the time to be physically active. But what we need to do is make it easier for other people that don't have the means and don't have the time. So if you have employees and you can you know, make it more flexible so they can go and do some exercise in their lunch break. Or if can, push for sidewalks or bike lanes or bike racks in your area, I think that's what's really going to help benefit those people that otherwise are not going to be able to remove those barriers on their own, maybe.
Mm, I agree. And even housing. Advocate for housing, places bigger, more density,
Mhm.
put more people in closer where, allow more people to live close to where they work and
Yep.
play.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah,
Absolutely. And even things like parking, a lot of cities have parking minimums that make it hard to build new buildings, but also if you require parking in a building, people are more likely to actually have a car.
yeah,
Obviously. And so yeah, like really all these things that make a city a better place to be also tend to make it a more active place, which is great for everybody.
exactly. I think I can't help but think that we're going towards the ultimate goal of making everybody, or not making everybody, but helping everybody be as active as they would like to be.
Mhm. Yeah.
And we talked a lot so far today. I think our conversation's been great. But is there anything you want to add to anything I haven't asked you about that you want to talk about in the podcast?
The only thing that I didn't talk about, I touched on it very briefly at the start, but I would just say, like I do an awful lot of research on screen time and screens and health. And the one thing that I would highlight, if people are looking for an easy thing they can do to improve their health, um, getting screens out of their own bedrooms and out of their kids' bedrooms, regardless of your age, it's very clear that when we're on screens, we tend to be seeing a lot of content that's unhealthy, or it's trying to convince us to do things that are unhealthy, eating too much, vaping, gambling, comparing ourselves to others, all things that make us less healthy physically or mentally. And then it also, using a screen, tends to really displace sleep, which has a huge impact on mental health. So if people are thinking, okay, what's a simple thing I could do to improve my health? Just cutting back on evening screen time and getting screens out of your bedroom and absolutely getting them out of your kids' bedrooms is a really simple thing you can do that should have a lot of health benefits for you and your family.
Yeah. I charge my phone outside my bedroom. I
Yeah,
just leave it out there. I go and read for a bit, then go to bed. I know
yeah,
it's not
exactly.
something that like everybody can do because it's a pretty big ask if you're using your phone for most of your adult life or even your
Mhm.
childhood, but it helps a lot. I
Yeah,
can speak from experience here.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
that's a great thing to add, and I think we're going to hear more about that in one of our later episodes. Everybody's tuning back in the future to hear about how screen time is probably not the best for you, but we've got a nice little sneak peek with Travis. I appreciate that, Travis. Thanks for coming on today. We've had a great conversation, and I just want to end this podcast with a little call to action from us to prioritize your physical activity. I think it's one thing we can take away from this. Physical activity is one of the most important things that you can have in your life. Anything, anything helps. Anything you can do, and keep your open mind to help yourself find new and enjoyable ways to stay active. Whether that be walking, biking, running, anything you want. And I think that's all we got for today.
Great. Thanks, Max.
No problem at all, Travis.